Welcome to the Explainer. So today we are doing something absolutely fascinating. If you've ever watched a student, kind of struggle in a one-size-fits-all classroom, or maybe you've looked at a micro school or a homeschool hybrid and thought, how does this actually work under the hood? Well, you are in the exact right place. We're going to decode the mechanics of alternative education models right from the ground up. We'll break down how to design a curriculum from first principles, balancing modern tools with that irreplaceable human core of learning. Let's dive right in.
To really wrap our heads around this, think about the contrast between a massive factory line and a small, intimate workshop. Traditional schooling, well, it often functions a bit like that factory line, right? It assumes the exact same pacing, the exact same method, and the same support is going to work for every single student at precisely the same time. The main goal, often, it's just coverage, just getting through the material. But a micro school, it's fundamentally different. It operates way more like a small workshop. Sure, there might be fewer tools lying around, but the ones they have are used with deep, intentional care. The goal isn't mass production. It's about true understanding, building personal confidence, and seeing visible growth. And honestly, that matters because it completely changes a learner's entire trajectory.
So here is our roadmap for this explainer. We'll be covering the small workshop model, the 6 truths of learning, the hybrid learning rhythm, and finally, tending the learning garden.
All right. Section 1, the small workshop model, from mass production to intentional craft.
You see, when we talk about micro schools or homeschool hybrids, we aren't just talking about a traditional school that's been, shrunk down in the wash. We're talking about an entirely different environment built on a totally different set of assumptions. So the crucial point is redefining what a curriculum actually is. We usually think of it as a heavy textbook or a checklist of subjects, right? But in a hybrid model, the curriculum is this overarching living system. It's the whole shebang, the arrangement of time, people, materials, and expectations. Think about it. If you simply change the amount of time a student has to explore a concept or swap out a screen for physical objects, you drastically shift their engagement. The curriculum is literally the environment that makes learning possible in the first place. Moving on to Section 2, the 6 truths of learning, the irreducible tools of the workshop. Okay, let's dive into this table, because if we strip away all those modern educational labels we hear all the time, online, in-person, micro school, traditional, we are left with 6 basic human needs for learning. We've got clarity, challenge, feedback, repetition, relationship, and meaning. Now, these aren't just fluffy educational buzzwords. They are the literal load-bearing pillars of education. When just one of these elements goes missing, the entire learning experience starts to wobble. Like without clarity, you get confusion. Without challenge, you just get boredom. Let's look at a few of these a little closer to see exactly why they matter so much to the everyday life of a learner. First up is clarity. Think about the absolute frustration of trying to pack a suitcase when you have zero idea if you're heading to the sunny Bahamas or, a blizzard in Antarctica. You might pack perfectly good clothes, but you won't know which ones actually matter for your specific destination. Well, learning works the exact same way. If a student doesn't know what they are actually trying to understand or what better even looks like, their effort becomes incredibly foggy. As an educator, a parent, or a curriculum designer, providing that clarity is your first, absolutely crucial job. Clarity is what turns random busy work into actual directed progress. Let's move to challenge and see how this builds right on top of clarity. Now, challenge is not a punishment. It is the literal engine of growth. Think of it like lifting weights at the gym. If the weight is too light, absolutely nothing changes. Biologically speaking, the human brain actually requires cognitive friction to form new neural pathways. It needs to struggle just a little bit. But on the flip side, if the weight is way too heavy, you get discouraged and just give up. Real learning happens perfectly in that sweet spot right between trivial and impossible. And the beauty of the workshop model is that it allows you to adjust that weight quickly for every individual learner. Next up is feedback. Here's the thing, you cannot improve what you cannot notice. If you're practicing a basketball shot, but you're wearing a blindfold and never see where the ball actually lands, you can't refine your motion. There's no way. And this is often where traditional schooling really struggles. Handing a student a graded test 3 weeks after they took it, that's like taking off the blindfold long after you've left the basketball court and gone home. It's just too late. In education, feedback shouldn't be some final, punishing judgment. It acts as a real-time mirror. It shows the learner's brain what is happening right now, allowing it to naturally correct its own trajectory for tomorrow. And then we have meaning. Think of meaning like a hook on a wall. Random, disconnected information, it just slides right off. But connected information, stuff anchored in the real world, that stays put. If a student only ever sees fractions as these abstract symbols on a piece of paper, the concept is super fragile. But if they use fractions to cook or to build something with their hands or handle money to buy something they really care about, boom, you've given them a hook. You've connected the learning directly to their emotions and their real life. You've given them a genuine reason to care. All right, on to Section 3, the hybrid learning rhythm, building the assembly. So, we have our ingredients, those 6 truths we just talked about, but now we need to build the daily assembly. Traditional subjects like math, science, and history are great, obviously, but they really only tell you what is being learned. A hybrid model zooms way out and asks how that development actually happens in practice. We have to design beyond just the subject matter. We have to ask the big questions. How will learners encounter the content? How will they practice it? How are we going to know it's actually sticking? We're designing a comprehensive environment here, not just handing out a reading list. To do that effectively, a strong hybrid curriculum uses repeating layers. You've got a launch or check-in, core instruction, practice and application, independent work, and reflection. Now, this doesn't mean every single day is identical and robotic, not at all. Think of it more like a heartbeat or a rhythm in a piece of music. There's a fascinating reality about cognitive load here. When a learner has a predictable daily rhythm they can actually trust, their brain stops worrying about the schedule. When they aren't anxious about what's happening next, all that freed up mental energy can be dedicated entirely to processing complex algebra or deep reading comprehension. That rhythm literally creates the freedom to focus.
Let's see why this rhythm matters in the real world. Take a student named Maya who's learning fractions. In this model, she doesn't just sit silently and crank through the same worksheet 50 times. Her day has sensory texture. She hears a short, engaging lesson. Then she heads over to a kitchen space and measures actual flour and sugar for a recipe. Later on, she sits in a circle and explains her math to a small group of peers. It is repetition, yes, but it isn't a boring drill. She is meeting the exact same idea from fresh, practical angles, and that is what builds massive, long-lasting retention over time.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 4, Tending the Learning Garden, Sustainability and Trust. So, having a beautifully designed curriculum on paper is wonderful, but how do we ensure it actually survives contact with reality over the long haul? Well, the best way to look at sustainability is the comparison between a machine and a garden. Look, it's incredibly tempting to build schools like a machine. Machines are predictable, they scale super easily, and let's be honest, they look absolutely fantastic on a spreadsheet. But if one single gear breaks, the entire thing grinds to a halt. A sustainable curriculum is much more like a garden. Gardens are messy, they're beautiful, and they are highly resilient. They are specifically designed to endure changing seasons, real-world stressors, and highly imperfect conditions. A garden allows for natural variation, and it just keeps growing even when the weather isn't perfect. And what actually protects that garden? The relationships. You know, the human element of teaching is so often dismissed as this soft feature, just to make people feel warm and fuzzy. But actually, scratch that, it isn't soft at all. It is the structural safety of the entire model. Think of trust and relationship as the rigid frame of a greenhouse. The frame itself doesn't grow the plants, but without it, the roof collapses and nothing survives the winter. Students absolutely will not take risks or stretch themselves for a challenge if they do not feel known and safe, for sure. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is this idea right here. Technology should support attention, not substitute for it. While we have incredible technology at our fingertips today for tracking, planning, and organizing, which is great, we have to remember this core rule. An app or an algorithm, it can deliver content perfectly, and it can grade multiple choice questions in an absolute instant, but it can never, ever replace an adult's unique ability to notice a confused look on a child's face, to respond with genuine empathy, and to actually care about their progress. So, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. As you look at education, ask yourself, are you just building a sequence of isolated lessons, or are you stepping up as a visionary designer, building the actual conditions in which learning can repeatedly, sustainably succeed? Because when you focus on clarity, challenge, feedback, repetition, relationship, and meaning, well, you aren't just teaching anymore. You possess the real power to transform education from a rigid factory into a thriving, beautiful ecosystem. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will see you next time.